Alright, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and some very interesting news as far as Eric Bieniemy becoming the Washington Commanders' next offensive coordinator. Potentially. Nothing's a sure thing, but every day that passes, it seems like it's becoming more and more likely. First of all, on the Ravens end, because they're really our only real competitors for his services right now, they're already on to second interviews with a lot of coordinators. So they're already deep into their options, including, sadly, my Georgia dog, Todd Monken. So it's looking more and more likely like the Ravens are probably going to go elsewhere other than Eric Bieniemy. And then also it just looks like the Commanders are literally waiting for him. We've already interviewed several guys, 6 guys already, 6 completely capable candidates, and a couple of them that I really like. And I feel like if those guys would have killed their interviews, and if the Commanders really wanted them, they wouldn't have let them walk out of those interviews without pen to paper. So it just seems like they're waiting on Eric Bieniemy. That's the only name we've been attached to that we have yet to have an official interview with, and we got to wait till after the Super Bowl to get it done. Now, whether we should prefer Eric Bieniemy to win or lose the Super Bowl, as far as if you want Eric Bieniemy to become our next offensive coordinator, I would probably say you would prefer if the Chiefs win it and then he goes out on a good note and officially leaves the nest and all of that type of stuff. But most importantly, the big news today is that Eric Bieniemy and Washington have mutual interests, according to reports that came from the Senior Bowl. That's huge news. That's the first time I've heard that Eric Bieniemy is actually interested in Washington. So far, it's always been on our end. It's been the teams that wanted him the most. Then it got narrowed down to basically the Ravens versus the Commanders for him. And then now this is the first time I've heard Eric Bieniemy's opinion on the situation and where he wants to go. And these are trustworthy sources as well. Also, there's sources saying that Eric Bieniemy is going to ask for $2.5 million per year. Is that even worth it? Is that too much? So we got to dive into all of that and more. But before we do, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscription button so you get notification immediately. And every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one, make sure you pull up every Sunday for the Commanders live stream, the call-in show. Sorry I couldn't do it this last one. A birthday came up and was busy the entire day. But make sure you pull up every other Sunday. We talk draft, we talk free agency, we talk franchise quarterback, we talk new owners, offensive coordinators, we debate everything. I open up the phone lines for y'all to call in. You ask whatever questions you may have or voice whatever opinions you may have on anything. It can even be outside of the Commanders. It can even be outside of football. So make sure y'all pull up every Sunday for the call-in show. And without further ado, let's get it. All right, so let's start with the biggest news. The fact that Eric Bieniemy is reportedly interested in actually becoming the Commanders' offensive coordinator. I mean, of course, there's going to be a lot of logistics things that you got to work out. Numbers, how long, and how much power is he going to have? I'm assuming he's going to have play calling responsibilities, which is something he hasn't necessarily had for the Chiefs, and why he wants to leave the Chiefs so that he can go prove himself as a good play caller, along with already being a good play designer, a good developer of quarterbacks like Pat Mahomes and things like that. He gets a lot of credit for that. But at the same time, Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy have split play calling responsibilities, according to Ian Rappaport. But it still sounds like Andy Reid controlled most of that department. And that's why the Commanders are a great job, because he can literally come here and he will be given the full keys to the offense, basically. Call your plays. I mean, we just let Scott Turner do it. And I'm one of those people that feels like everything was not Scott Turner's fault. And I feel like he gets way more blame than he deserves for last season. But at the end of the day, Scott Turner was still Scott Turner. And the fact that Ron Rivera let him call plays, even though he was that poor at calling plays, of course, you could just assume that Eric Bieniemy would be able to come here and call plays. And that's not the same situation on a lot of these teams around the NFL. So we already have a leg up on the competition with that. And then, like I've already spoken about several videos, several live streams, is the fact that the Commanders also have a situation where their current head coach, their current GM, everybody could be gone this time next year. The new owner could come in, they're reporting March at the latest, to buy the new team, and he could just do a clean sweep immediately, or he could give everybody that's currently here already, like Ron Rivera as head coach most notably, a year to prove themselves. And if he doesn't like it, he could clean house. And if you're Eric Bieniemy and isolated from what Rivera's doing, from what Martin Mayhew was doing, from what everybody else is doing, if the new owner looks at you as the offensive coordinator and is like, you're doing a great job, even though we're not winning games, I'm not blaming you. It may be Rivera's fault, maybe Jack Del Rio's fault, maybe a lack of talent, so that may be more in Martin Mayhew's situation and things like that. Marty Herney Chris Poley, all of those type of guys. If the new owner can come in and isolate the fact that Eric Bieniemy is doing a great job, you could be first in line for the promotion for head coach. You could be the first to get the interview rather than somebody coming from the outside to be his next head coach. And a new owner with a new head coach and potentially a new quarterback, because that's just what owners do. Even if Sam Howell goes out there and balls out, he may want to bring in his own guy. And that, again, that's what owners do. They want to have their guys so that they can feel like they had an imprint and an effect on the team. Even if you buy a team and it's great, and it's like, if it's not broken, don't fix it type of thing, a new owner will still come and try to fix what's not broken. But if you can go out there and prove that you deserve to be here, maybe you become the head coach for an NFL franchise that's in a arguably top 5, at the very least top 10 market in the NFL with a lot of talent. I mean, every team doesn't have Terry McLaurin's, Jonathan Allen's, potentially a Deron Payne long-term, Cameron Curls, Jahan. I mean, there's a lot of talent here. Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson. There's a lot to work with. So it's a very attractive job. But that's enough for that rant. I've done deeper dives into that whole situation and why the Commanders are actually a more attractive destination than people probably think or give us credit for. But I just kind of wanted to skim through that right now just to kind of do a review as to why Eric Bieniemy should want to come be the offensive coordinator for the Commanders. Of course, there's all of the chaos and everything that's going on, but if you look at it in the glass half full type situation, this could actually be the best opportunity for somebody like Eric Bieniemy. But let's tune into what Ben Standig said from The Athletic about the Senior Bowl situation and what he's hearing as far as Eric Bieniemy and his connection to the Washington Commanders. He said, quote, "The Senior Bowl offers incoming draft prospects a chance to show off their skills and NFL teams to take a closer look at how these players might help their cause. The week beyond on-field work also consists of get-to-know-you meetings and chatter on all sorts of league-wide topics, like new offensive coordinators, new head coaches, all of this type of stuff. Here's a sampling of what was said this week about the prospects and various matters involving the Washington Commanders. Scouts, execs, and agents in Mobile, Alabama were granted anonymity for competitive reasons and to offer their candid opinions." I'm not going to dive into the player stuff in this video. I'm going to do a whole video on the Senior Bowl and things like that, and especially looking at it from the Commanders lens as far as our biggest needs like offensive line, linebacker, cornerback, maybe even quarterback and things like that. I want to take a deep dive into the Senior Bowl, who impressed the most, who are guys that we should be targeting, and even some potential player comps. So be on the lookout for that full Senior Bowl breakdown video coming out. So we're not going to talk about that here, but I just want to talk about the whole Eric Bieniemy situation. He went on to say in the same article, "The Commanders hope to interview Chiefs coordinator Eric Bieniemy, and mutual interest exists. Multiple people with direct knowledge of the situation told The Athletic. With Kansas City and Sunday's Super Bowl, formal meetings would not occur until the following week at the earliest. Bieniemy's intrigue extends beyond Washington with a list of suitors that include the Ravens and Titans." So we're not the only one that he's interested in, but at the very least we make the list. And again, for reasons I've already stated, I feel like we should be at the highest point on the list. Now, of course, me as a Commanders fan, Thomas Brown is my favorite candidate. After what I've seen and heard about from Charles London and how he handled being the offensive coordinator for the American team for the Senior Bowl this entire past week, he's risen pretty high on my list. He may not necessarily be above Eric Bieniemy, but I really like him as a potential candidate as well. And then I also really like Eric Bieniemy as well. He's probably in my top 3 candidates, so I would be very happy to have him. So let's just go ahead and get that out the way. Continuing with Ben Standig's article, he said some in Mobile viewed the longtime assistant of head coach Andy Reid as the favorite for the Commanders opening. That's despite no consensus over whether Bieniemy would provide the needed impact for an offense that ranked 24th in scoring with 18.9 points per game in 2022. The opportunity to call plays, something Bieniemy doesn't handle full-time with the Chiefs, would be a positive for a perpetual head coaching candidate who is yet to land that big job. An endorsement from Reid, one of Rivera's football mentors, would carry weight in Washington. That's a good point that I haven't discussed yet. Ron Rivera learned a lot of what he knows from Andy Reid. And if Andy Reid backs somebody and gives them high praise, Rivera's definitely going to eat that up. So Rivera may be one of the main people in our organization that wants an Eric Bieniemy, because Andy Reid has probably spoken very highly of him. Head coach Ron Rivera's future with the Commanders is another factor for any candidate, as owner Dan Snyder might soon sell the franchise he's owned since 1999. So that's really interesting, man, this Eric Bieniemy situation. I'm not saying I would necessarily put money on the fact that he would end up coming to the Commanders, but I think it's more likely than a lot of people thought before this offseason started. Well, before our regular season ended. Like 3 months ago, the whole Eric Bieniemy thing has always just been like, yeah, that would be nice, but we've never actually been connected with him. We've never tried to interview him. He's never said that he's interested in potentially coaching for the Commanders or anything like that. I mean, first of all, there wasn't an opening last year. Scott Turner was still our offensive coordinator, but still, we kept wanting Eric Bieniemy as like a potential head coach and things like that. At least some of us wanted to at least give him an opportunity. But this is the most we've ever been attached to him. The fact that there's clear mutual interest from the Commander side and the Eric Bieniemy side, that's a new thing that we did not know until these past few weeks. So that changes everything. Who knows what can happen? Also, moving on, JP Finley tweeted, spoke with league source about options for Eric Bieniemy after the Super Bowl. Sounds like multiple opportunities and a salary north of $2.5 million per year. Question asked, would Washington pay that? That's a really good question, man. Would Washington, Rivera, and most notably Dan Snyder, who will more than likely not even own this team past March, be willing to pay that guy that much money? Dan Snyder may be trying to keep as much of his own money as possible. There's already been trustworthy sources and reports that have said that the Commanders are going to spend very lightly in free agency, as far as coaching hires, everything. They're going to be extremely frugal as long as Dan Snyder is the owner. Now, if Dan Snyder can sell the team sooner rather than later, then it's quite likely that the Commanders would be willing to pay that price, because a new owner, if he likes Eric Bieniemy enough, would potentially be willing to give him that money. But it seems like Dan Snyder is penny pinching right now, and he's not willing to do anything. I mean, even if for some reason Dan Snyder is still our owner going into free agency, it's less likely that we re-sign Deron Payne long term. It's way less likely that we bring in outside free agents from other teams to big money. They've already reported that we're going to be extremely frugal and cheap this offseason as long as Dan Snyder is the owner, up to the point that Dan Snyder is the owner. So we'll see how this goes. Again, maybe if Dan Snyder sells the team, then the Commanders will be willing to pay $2.5 million. But even if Dan Snyder's here, they may be able to convince him to go ahead and go through with it. We'll see. I feel like Rivera will be willing to do it, but it's not his money to spend. It's not Jason Wright's money to spend. It's not Marty Herney's or Martin Mayhew's money to spend. So I'm pretty sure if they all like Eric Bieniemy, that $2.5 million per year doesn't bother them. But now that begs the question, how much do offensive coordinators normally make? Because when you hear $2.5 million per year, that doesn't sound like a lot. But when you think about how much offensive coordinators usually make, that is a lot. That's why people are kind of like, are we sure the Commanders will be willing to do that? And is everybody just outbidding themselves? Was the price lower than that? And then now, since several teams are interested, he's like, all right, y'all keep outbidding yourselves and keep running the price up. I'll take the highest offer type of thing. So we'll see. But the average salary for an NFL coordinator is around $1 million per year. But of course, there's a lot of variation depending on the experiences of the coordinator, the success of a team, and the overall value and resources of a franchise. What a franchise is willing to pay them, what they've done throughout their career up to that point when they got the new contract, all of that type of stuff. But remember, the first coordinator to ever even clear $1 million annually was Marvin Lewis in 2002. Before 2002, no coordinator was making even $1 million per year. Now Eric Bieniemy is already asking for 2.5 potentially. Just to back it up a little bit, 1067 The Fan reported, many have wondered if the reason the Commanders have yet to hire a new offensive coordinator is because they could be targeting Chiefs Eric Bieniemy after the Super Bowl. Again, my point earlier, it seems like that's their number one guy on their list right now, because if they liked anybody else even a little bit more that they've already interviewed, they would have just went ahead and interviewed him. I understand due diligence, but you can kind of tell that Eric Bieniemy is the guy they probably want the most as of right now. A source now tells 106.7 The Fan's JP Finley that Bieniemy could have multiple opportunities on the table for him, and choosing whether he chooses Washington might come down to what the Commanders are willing to pay. So that's interesting. Not necessarily situation, not new owner, not potential head coach getting fired, not players on the team, not a lot of factors that you would think would matter. It may literally just come down to how much we're willing to pay him. And again, it just depends on how much the Commanders really want this guy. It really seems like, again, based on several factors, that Eric Bieniemy is their number one guy. But are they willing to go that far for him? I mean, how much credit does he deserve for everything going on with the Chiefs? I mean, when you have Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill, and even though Tyreek Hill left, they still have a lot of good options. I mean, my Georgia Bulldog, McCole Hardman. And then they picked up Kadarius Toney for pennies, who, even though he's a Florida guy, that man is different and has a lot of talent as long as he can stay healthy. So they've had a great arsenal of pieces. Once they put in all of that money and capital into fixing the O-line, it's just like, how much work has he had to do, especially again with him having to split responsibilities play calling wise and scheme design, all of that stuff with Andy Reid. Andy Reid gets a lot of the credit for it. And I'm pretty sure Eric Bieniemy had a lot to deal with Pat Mahomes' development, but at the end of the day, Pat Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. And there's probably several coordinators that could have gotten that out of him, but I doubt Eric Bieniemy could have gotten Pat Mahomes level production out of several quarterbacks. So I think Eric Bieniemy does deserve a lot of the credit and deserves more credit than he's been getting for a lot of the things that have gone well for the Chiefs and the fact that they're even in the Super Bowl right now. But the question still stands, are you willing to pay him that $2.5 million per year? I would, but I'm just trying to play devil's advocate and give you both sides of the situation. And then as far as the only other team I could really see truly being a better situation for Eric Bieniemy is probably the Texans. Because JP Finley said it best. Considering DeMeco Ryans got a 6-year deal and that team is in full rebuild mode, that offensive coordinator job might be more appealing than at first glance. Autonomy on play calling, low expectations, probably a gifted young QB in the draft coming up, Bryce Young or CJ Stroud at worst, and something to build. And that low expectations thing can be huge, man. But at the same time, DeMeco Ryans, I can see him being there forever. I think the Texans got a home run higher in DeMeco Ryans, so it's not like Eric Bieniemy could go there and potentially become the head coach of that same team. Whereas he could come to the Commanders, be our offensive coordinator this year, and potentially become our head coach next year, which is his ultimate goal. But it seems like also, according to rumors, one of his highest goals, may not be the #1 one, is to get paid at least $2.5 million per year. And at the same time, with the Commanders, we're very talented. Even though we have higher expectations, we also have a better team than the Texans, than a lot of teams that people probably won't even give us credit for. I mean, honestly, with just average quarterback play, we should be winning 10, 11 games, literally. And at the very least, make it into the playoffs as one of the lower seeds. The defense is definitely good enough to make it into the playoffs. Honestly, our defense is better than a lot of the defenses that were in the playoffs. Our defense is better than the Chiefs that's currently in the playoffs. And statistically, in some ways, even better than the Eagles. May not be better than the Eagles overall, but this defense is easily good enough to make it into the Super Bowl if our offense were good enough. And then we have arguably an elite receiving core. Skill positions are really good. I love our running backs. We got to figure out tight end a little bit. We got to figure out offensive line, but if Eric Bieniemy can come in here and get greatness out of Sam Howell, even if it's not to the level of Pat Mahomes, at the very least, if it's just better than Taylor Heinicke and Carson Wentz, the Commanders who didn't make the playoffs in 2022, Eric Bieniemy comes in here, Sam Howell balls out, and we make the playoffs in 2023, he's going to get a lot of credit for that, especially as the play caller. It's just going to look like, oh, Eric Bieniemy came in and everything just worked out. Like, he made it happen. Even if he doesn't necessarily deserve all of the credit, I'm pretty sure he's going to get the majority of it. So that's why this could, again, be a really good situation for him, and that's why I can see why there's mutual interest. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section, let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Eric Bieniemy's mutual interest with the Commanders, him wanting to get paid $2.5 million per year. Do you feel like that's too much? Are you willing to do that? Do you even like Eric Bieniemy in the first place? And of course, man, shouts out to all of my sponsors, especially my Pro Bowl sponsors whose names you see scrolling on the screen right now. Again, leave a like on this video if you liked it, if you learned anything. I'll catch y'all later. I'm out.